In continuation with our previous autonomic nervous system topics, today we are starting with beta blockers, beta adrenoceptor blockers. This topic will be dealt in two parts. So today is the part 1 of this. So we will complete this whole lecture with following learning objectives, that at the end of the lecture, learner would be able to know about the various types of beta blockers, their pharmacological actions, their pharmacokinetic properties, their interactions with various other drugs, their adverse drug reactions and contraindications, and their therapeutic uses. You must be familiar with the importance of sympathetic nervous system, with the famous fight or flight response, which is a response because of stimulation of sympathetic nervous system, the reactions to any danger or some other unanticipated condition. So in fight response, sympathetic nervous system helps us in take a aggressive approach, or in fearful conditions it is the flight response which dominates. So if we look into the historical perspective of beta adrenoceptors, the story starts with the Ahlqvist hypothesis that the effect of catecholamines were mediated by activation of various adrenergic receptors, alpha and beta receptors, which are responsible for all the actions by catecholamines. So first such selective beta receptor agent was dichloroisoproterenol, which is a partial agonist. Afterwards, Sir James Black and his colleague initiated a program in late 1950s to develop additional beta blockers with the resulting synthesis and characterization of propranolol. This is the photograph of Sir James White Black, who is born on 14 July 1924. He is a Scottish doctor, pharmacologist who invented propranolol, synthesized cimetidine, and was awarded the Nobel Prize for Medicine in 1988 for these discoveries. So he has done extensive work on beta receptor blockers and histamine, and many other areas in basic pharmacology. So there are various beta adrenoceptor blockers out there, and which can be distinguished by the following properties, like their relative affinity to beta 1 and beta 2 receptors. Some are having intrinsic sympathomimetic activity because of their partial agonistic action. Some are having additional alpha receptor blocking properties. There is also differences in their lipid solubility properties. So agents which are more lipid soluble, they are having better central nervous system penetration, and their capacity to induce vasodilatation and other pharmacokinetic parameters. So broadly, these are the characteristics by which we can differentiate between these, and also their therapeutic use or their contraindications or precautions will be based on these many variation in these properties. So prototype, although it is a non-selective blocker, propranolol is the oldest one, and all the pharmacological actions of beta blockers will be discussed in detail by taking the propranolol as the prototype of beta blocker. And afterwards, all other beta blockers will be compared relative to propranolol. So propranolol is a non-selective beta adrenoreceptor antagonist. That means it can block beta 1 as well as beta 2 adrenoceptor with equal affinity. So examples of beta 1 selective blockers are metoprolol, atenolol, acebutolol, bisoprolol and esmolol. They have somewhat greater affinity for beta 1 than beta 2 receptors. But remember, selectivity is not absolute. That means in higher doses, this selectivity can be blurred. Propranolol is a pure antagonist. That means it doesn't have any partial agonistic property or intrinsic sympathomimetic property to activate beta receptors. Several beta blockers like pindolol, acebutolol, they activate beta receptors partially in the absence of catecholamine. You must remember that partial agonistics are those agents which behave like full antagonists in the presence of full agonist. But that's why they are having partial antagonist property in lack of or in lower levels of catecholamines. Intrinsic activity of these drugs are less than that of a full agonist, like isoprenaline. These partial agonists have this activity. They may prevent profound bradycardia or negative inotropy action of other beta blockers in a resting heart. But clinical potential of this particular partial agonistic activity is not much clear, and maybe sometimes this property can be disadvantageous, like in secondary prevention of myocardial infarctions. That means in patients of ischemic heart disease where they are being used, if these agents being used as partial agonistic, they can increase heart rate and precipitate MI. Beta receptor antagonists with local anesthetic property, or we can also say that is membrane stabilizing activity, is also there, and this membrane stabilizing property is independent of their beta blockade, and they are propranolol, acebutolol and carvedilol, pindolol, metoprolol, betabolol and labetalol have very slight membrane stabilizing effects. Although most beta adrenoceptor antagonists do not block alpha adrenergic receptors, labetalol, carvedilol and buccinolol, they block both alpha 1 and beta adrenergic receptors. Other beta blockers are also having vasodilator properties like celiprolol, nebivolol, nipradilol, carteolol, betoxolol, bopindolol and bivantolol, but with some other mechanisms which we will see later on. So if we see the classification of beta adrenoceptic antagonists, they can be divided into 4 parts. One is non-selective beta 1 generation. So they are like propranolol, they are both beta 1 as well as beta 2 receptor blockers, and because of chronology of their discovery, they are called first generation of beta blockers. And second generation are those beta blockers who are having beta 1 selective property. Now comes the third generation, which are the relatively recent one. And this third generation beta blockers, some books can also say third and fourth generation, but they are discovered very recently or nearby. Standard books classify them into third generation only. And in this third generation, there are another two varieties. Non-selective third generation beta blockers and beta 1 selective third generation beta blockers. So in the first generation, we have nedolol, penbutolol, propranolol, pindolol, timolol, sotalol. Then in second generation, that means beta 1 selective beta blockers, there are acebutolol, atenolol, bisoprolol, esmolol, metoprolol. Remember, these are the selective beta 1 blockers, whether they are from second generation, whether they are from third generation. They are important in treatment of hypertension. Why? We will see this later on. In third generation, non-selective ones are cardiolol, buxindolol, carvedilol, and labetalol. And third generation selective are betoxolol, celiprolol, and nebivolol. Third generation beta blockers, they can be differentiated because of their additional mechanism of vasodilatation. So some are vasodilator because of their nitric oxide production properties. Celiprolol, nebivolol, cardiolol. Some are vasodilator because of their beta 2 receptor agonism property. Like celiprolol again, cardiolol again, and bopindolol again. So these three are having, in addition to beta 2 receptors blocking property, these three are also having the nitric oxide production properties. Next are calcium entry blockade. So they are carvedilol, betaxolol, biventolol. Then potassium channel openers like tilsolol. And antioxidant activity they are having like carvedilol. So these are some additional mechanism of action in addition to beta blocking actions, which more peculiar in third generation. So if we go into the pharmacological actions of these agents, so we will classify them according to system, and that will be more easy and to understand, and even they can correlate with their therapeutic uses. So whenever we learn pharmacological actions, it is always better to correlate or align them with the therapeutic uses, because therapeutic uses also, if you remember them haphazardly, then it is very difficult to remember them for long term. So it is better that we learn system-wise pharmacological action, and we also used to remember or try to remember their therapeutic uses according to systemic uses, like cardiovascular uses, CNS uses, and other. So catecholamines, as we all know, they have positive chronotropic and positive inotropic action. That means beta blockers, they slow the heart rate by blocking these beta receptors, and they will also decrease myocardial contractility. That means they will decrease heart rate, they will decrease force of contraction. When tonic stimulation of beta receptor is low, so that it blockade or these above effects, decrease in heart rate and decrease in myocardial contractility, will be dependent upon the existing sympathetic tone. If the sympathetic tone is high, then the effect of blockade will be more marked. When tonic stimulation of beta receptor is low, this effect is correspondingly modest. So there will be modest decrease in heart rate, modest decrease in myocardial contractility. When the sympathetic nervous system is activated as during exercise or stress, beta receptor antagonists, they prevent or attenuate the expected rise in heart rate. Short-term administration of beta receptor antagonist decreases cardiac output. Peripheral resistance increases in proportion to maintain blood pressure. Basically, it is more in non-selective beta blockers, because you all know that beta 2 receptors which are present in skeletal blood vessels, and they are responsible for skeletal blood vessel dilatation. But blockade of these receptors by non-selective blockers will lead to increase in total peripheral resistance. And as a result of these receptors and compensatory reflexes. So increased sympathetic nervous system activity will lead to activation of vascular alpha receptors. With beta blockers that are also alpha 1 blockers, such as labetalol, carvedilol and buxindolol, cardiac output is maintained because alpha receptor is also blocked and beta 2 receptor is also blocked. And cardiac output is maintained with a greater fall in peripheral resistance. So beta blocker, the beta 1 receptors are blocked and alpha 1 receptors are also blocked by these agents. Beta receptor blockers, they reduce sinus rate. They reduce rate of firing from sinus node, which is because of beta 1 receptor. And they also decrease the slope of spontaneous rate of depolarization of ectopic pacemakers. And they also slow conduction is atria and in the atrioventricular node. That means they delay the conduction at AV node and they increase the functional refractory period of AV node. Which other agents are doing this? So they are calcium channel blockers, digitalis-like drug. They all decrease the AV conduction by increasing the refractory period. That means they reduce heart rate. They also reduce rate of conduction. They reduce transmission of impulses from atria to ventricles. So they are used as antihypertensive agents. Because of them, total peripheral, because of blockade of beta 2 receptor, initially there is increase in total peripheral vascular resistance. But because cardiac output falls, so overall initially there is no change in blood pressure. But chronically adaptation in peripheral vascular resistance occurs. So chronically, because of reduction in cardiac output, total peripheral vascular resistance adapts itself and it comes to normal or even low in hypertensive patients, leading to fall in blood pressure. There are some various other mechanisms which are also responsible for reduction in blood pressure is decreased noradrenaline release from presynaptic or nerve endings. By blocking beta 1 receptor, they also block beta 1 receptor which are present in juxtaglomerular cells of kidney, which are responsible for release in renin. Then renin will stimulate conversion of angiotensin 1 to 2, which is a very powerful vasoconstrictor. So they decrease renin release from kidney, which is also one of the contributory mechanism in reduction in blood pressure. They have significant effect on cardiac rhythm and automaticity. So again, because they are reducing sinus rate, because they reduce spontaneous rate of ectopic pacemaker, they slow conduction. So some beta blockers are also having membrane stabilizing activity additionally, which is helpful in arrhythmia. So another important thing is where their effect, they are more evident during the dynamic exercises. So in the presence of beta adrenoceptor blocker, exercise-induced increase in heart rate and myocardial contractility is attenuated or inhibited. However, the exercise-induced increase in cardiac output is less affected because of an increase in stroke volume. So, stroke volume increases, so overall cardiac output, effect on cardiac output is not that much marked. In healthy elderly, so these effects are corresponding to the effects in aging, sympathetic nervous system effect in aging population. So, in healthy elderly person, these changes in heart rate are smaller than young individual. Why? Because sympathetic tone is much higher during the young period. In elderly persons, sympathetic tone also decreases with aging. So, they are not marked if individual is healthy. Exercise performance may be impaired to a lesser extent by beta-1 selective agents than by non-selective agents. Why? Because blockade of beta, if an agent is non-selective, it will also block beta-2 receptor in skeletal blood vessels, and these muscles, skeletal muscles, are very much important during exercise. And because of blockade of beta-2 receptors, blood flow to these regions is inhibited. So, they will blunt the increase in blood flow. What is the effect of coronary blood flow? So, usually the net effect on coronary blood flow is to improve the relationship between cardiac oxygen supply and demand. Exercise tolerance generally is improved in patients with angina. They are being used in prophylaxis of angina, and whose capacity to exercise is limited by the development of chest pain. So, exercise capacity is generally, exercise tolerance is improved. Beta receptor blockers, they decrease the effect of catecholamines on the oxygen consumption. All the determinants of oxygen consumption, and that is the logic of using them in prophylaxis of angina. Usually the net effect is to improve the relationship between cardiac oxygen supply and demand. Exercise tolerance is improved in patients of angina. Now cardiovascular actions are over. We have seen their action on heart rate, their action on cardiac output, their action on blood pressure, their action on automaticity of SA node, their action on conduction velocity, and their action on AV node, and their effect in angina. So now, what are their actions on respiratory system? Although beta-1 selective antagonist or antagonist with intrinsic sympathomimetic action, less likely than the non-selective like propranolol to increase airway resistance, because airway contains beta-2 receptors. Drugs such as celiprolol with beta-1 selectivity and beta-2 partial agonism, they are of potential. They are devoid of any chance of these bronchoconstriction constrictor activity. But Clinical experience with these agents in patients of bronchial asthma or other respiratory disease like COPD is limited. In normal person who is taking beta blocker, even non-selective, there are very less chances of bronchoconstriction. That means susceptible individuals are who? The individuals who are having bronchial asthma or chronic obstructive pulmonary disease or other type of respiratory compromises. Central nervous system effects, they can cause behavioral changes. That means they have their cognitive actions. Forgetfulness is there in some individuals. Also, dreaming kind of effects. Long-term nightmares could also be there. That means, and these actions will be more with which type of agents? Highly lipid soluble agents. So those agents can cross blood-brain barrier, and CNS effects actions are more prominent with these agents. But they are also being used in as anxiolytics, where there is predominance of autonomic nervous system symptoms like palpitation, tremor. So these are the drugs which can be used because of their blocking of these autonomic related symptoms of anxiety like palpitation, tremor, perspiration. Metabolic actions of beta adrenoceptor blockers. Most of the metabolic actions of noradrenaline, adrenaline, they are because of beta-2 receptors. So remember, these metabolic actions will be less with the more selective blockers. So beta receptor blockers, they modify the metabolism of carbohydrate and lipids. So catecholamines, they promote glycosenolysis and they mobilize glucose in response to hypoglycemia. So where this becomes important? Response to hypoglycemia. So there are autonomic response to hypoglycemia, and which indicates, or they are the warning signs which tells the patient or individual that he is having hypoglycemia. If these effects are blocked or these symptoms are blocked by beta receptors, then the problem will be there. Let's see. So non-selective agents, they may delay the recovery from hypoglycemia in type 1 insulin-dependent diabetes mellitus, but infrequently in type 2 diabetes mellitus. Also interfere with the counter-regulatory effect of catecholamines, which are secreted normally in response to hypoglycemia. So in addition to the delaying the recovery by inhibiting the glycogenolysis, they are also masking the sign and symptom of hypoglycemia. They also, by stimulating hormone-sensitive lipoprotein lipase in fat cells, they increase free fatty acids, plasma triglyceride, and they will increase LDL-HDL ratio, which is not beneficial by blocking of their metabolic action. Thus, beta adrenergic receptor antagonists, they should be used with great caution in patients with labile diabetes and frequent hypoglycemic reactions. If such a drug is indicated, a beta-1 selective antagonist is preferred because these drugs are less likely to delay recovery from hypoglycemia, because response to hypoglycemia is with which receptor? Beta-2 receptors, because most of the metabolic actions are because of this beta-2 receptors in liver. Now action in skeletal muscle. So they will cause inhibition of tremors. That's why they are being used in performance anxiety or tremors related with anxiety. ophthalmic actions of beta blocker or actions on eye. They will decrease production of aqueous humor, but don't have any effect on pupillary size. Now we will move to the pharmacokinetic property of these agents. So because of their lipid solubility, they are well absorbed from oral route, but because of that only they are having low bioavailability. Why? Because they are having high first pass metabolism, and this also indicates some type of interactions. Whenever there is decrease in liver enzyme because of some liver pathology or because of congestive heart failure where liver is congested, in those all conditions a dose reduction is necessary because now the metabolism will be decreased. So existing liver diseases or any other disease which directly or indirectly affects the liver metabolism will call for some dose adjustment. Basically they are preferred with food metabolized primarily in liver and excreted in urine. Some common drug interactions with these agents: digitalis and verapamil. You can answer this question. Why? Sometimes before we discussed that beta blockers, they cause delay in AV nodal transmission. And in addition to that, calcium channel blocker who are centrally acting or more acting on myocardium and digitalis, these agents are also delaying the AV conduction. So concurrent use of these drugs can cause heart block or dangerous bradycardia. Insulin or oral hypoglycemic, yes, they will delay the recovery from hypoglycemia. In addition to, they will also mask sign and symptoms of hypoglycemia. Alpha agonist, because their effect will be blunted because of vasoconstriction and rise in BP caused by alpha agonist. So their effect cannot be that much effective. And non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. Why? When you see the pathology, in coming chapters we will be taking pathology or renin-angiotensin system, you will see the non-steroidal anti-inflammatory agents by inhibiting the prostaglandin synthesis in kidney, they will start accumulating there will be accumulation of sodium and water, and which will antagonize the action of beta blockers. And membrane stabilizing action or action on conduction of lidocaine. So there are chances of interaction. Adverse drug reaction with these agents are like myocardial insufficiency could be there, bradycardia, which is reflex bradycardia, can be there, or bradycardia is there because they decrease heart rate. If patient is already having ischemic heart disease, unknowingly they can further depress the heart and there will be bradycardia. Then in respiratory diseases like chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, non-selective blockers can cause dangerous bronchoconstriction and respiratory insufficiency, even precipitation of acute asthma attack in patients of bronchial asthma. And worsening of vasospastic angina. So there is one classical angina and there is fringe mental angina. So they will cause worsening of vasospastic angina by shifting the blood from ischemic zone to non-ischemic zone. Carbohydrate tolerance can be disturbed even in pre-diabetic individuals. because of their effect on carbohydrate metabolism. Sudden withdrawal of beta blocker can cause rebound hypertension. They can also, by blocking beta 2 receptor by non-selective blockers, they can cause worsening of peripheral vascular disease. My bad, it is there should be full form should be there. So worsening of peripheral vascular disease and precipitation of Raynaud's phenomena can be there with peripheral vascular insufficiency patients. And alteration of lipid profile because of blockade of beneficial effects of beta receptors on lipid metabolism. So, worsening or altered lipid profile can be there. So, with this, we end this first part of beta blockers. Thanks a lot. In the next lecture tomorrow, the same time, we will see the individual beta blockers with their relative difference with prototype agents and their therapeutic uses in details. Thanks a lot.